Ms. Pitti. Our fourth speaker is Mr. Semir Sali. He is a PhD candidate in Turin University, Italy, and his presentation will be in a very relevant subject of globalization and human rights, a complex relationship. Mr. Sali, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I'd like just to correct that I'm not a PhD candidate yet, but probably.
I wish you to be.
Yeah, thank you very much. So my topic for today is human rights and globalization, and as my paper suggests, yes, it's a very complex one. There is disagreement among authors whether this relationship could be seen or perceived as an alliance. For example, there are certain authors that say that both concepts can coexist between each other on the basis that if globalization would commit to the protection of human rights, then we could all sort of get all the economic promises of globalization may be enjoyed universally by everyone. The problem with this conception is that it's too optimistic, because we know that since the beginning of the modern globalization, I'm talking from the 70s of the 20th century till now, the gap between developed countries and developing countries has been consistently growing. So there is a problem with that. We have some other authors that say, well, yes, human rights are part of and different from globalization. They've been having common goals in the beginning, but then they have been clashing together. There are other authors who would go and take a very critical approach and say, no, human rights are just an illusion. They're just an imperialistic tool used by a neoliberal agenda to further their goals. And all these theories have their own arguments. But my thesis is that we should try to understand the structure of human rights. And I would propose to analyze this relationship by distinguishing the whole human rights body into civil and political rights to economic, social, and cultural rights. And there we will see that we will have a very clear view. We'll see that with regard to the former civil and political rights, there's a sort of complete compatibility and alliance between the two. And then we will see then there are sort of clashes between social and economic rights and globalization. I will start by the first, and I will sort of introduce the common elements between civil and political rights and globalization. And yes, first of all, it's universality. Are human rights truly universal? Well, if we see from just a purely theoretical perspective, human rights apply to all humans as such. And irrespective of their own differences, nationality, ethnicity, gender, so on and so forth. And if we follow this logic, well, we'll see then the human rights are inherently, per se, they are universal. And even the term universal will be redundant, because we would just emphasize what human rights are. But of course, we know that this is not the case. We know that in the substance, human rights, or what we call the whole body of human rights, they differ. Some of them are truly universal, and some of them are not, or they are in the way of becoming universal. Obviously, what are the core human rights, which I believe they are universal? are the rights that have reached the status of jus cogens, which are peremptory norms that are in no way cannot be derogated by any right in any treaty or whatsoever. They're supposed to be even higher than any kind of norm, even customary norms. Of course, there are other authors that disagree, but I will not go into that detail. So the thing is that civil and political rights, which were even incepted before, so they are the first generation of human rights. They stem from Enlightenment ages, from Hobbes, Locke, Rousseau, Kant, Jeremy Bentham, and they were fought throughout the centuries with the French Revolution, the American Declaration, and so on and so forth. So they come from sort of they're Western values. We have to admit that. The problem is that other culture thinks that, well, yeah, we have our own human rights. And they are not actually what you think is universal and only universal for you. We have our own universal rights. So how do we deal with that? Should we be politically correct, say, yeah, we respect your rights. But the problem is, where is the reasonable limit to be drawn? Where's the reasonable limit to be drawn between respect for the other and not going beyond, because this is what everyone, the whole humanity will say, this would be wrong. Now, for some rights, which are, say, prohibition of genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity, I would say there's no discussion about that because, well, we all know, we would not, no one would like to get arbitrarily killed. The problem would be with other sort of tradition rights. What will we think, for example, of forced marriage? Some culture would say that these are our own tradition, and some other culture, Western culture, would say like, no, this is totally unacceptable because the females, they should decide what they want. So I would suggest we use a prominent philosopher's theory, John Rawls. He had this original position that the veil of ignorance, which I assume most of you know, but I will kind of go through it. And he assumes that if we imagine that we live in a world that we don't know what our status in the future will be, right? So we don't know if we will be more intelligent or not. Without this, we don't know our position in society. But we are given a choice about constructing the rules. And obviously, human beings are, rationals. So we would choose not, at least, not to allow arbitrarily rules. So because we would think that we would fear of us being a victim of those rules. So I think this is the threshold we should use, where if we go, and would be the minimum, right? Because human rights is about minimum. Every country then, every government could decide to further enhance human rights. But in the international level, we decide what's the minimum a government cannot go beyond. I would move on with another feature, which is individuality. Civil and political rights are individual rights. They are mostly negative rights. They deal with liberties. The state should be far away from me, should not tell me what to do. He should just regulate security and give me the conditions I could live my life, but that's it. And these kind of rights they too stem from very long time. And I would say, keeping in mind that in most constitutions, these are the first rights we see in all constitutional Article 1, 2, 3, 4. First, we have usually sovereignty that belongs to people. This is kind of republic, and then usually we always have what are the liberties that guarantees the fundamental guarantees of citizens. And from this perspective, globalization is very compatible because, and I'm referring mostly to the economic globalization. I'm referring to the advent of free market, deregulation, privatization, and all so on and so forth. Like transnational corporations, they still do, even though sometimes they're perceived that as violators of human rights, they do require some level of protection in order to come and invest in one country. They need not to be arbitrarily treated by the government, and that's why they make extensive use of bilateral investment treaties where there are specific rules that a government has to respect their own rights. But then, if we go and see the other part of the medal, and we see...
Mr. Sali, please, just to remind you, you have only 2 more minutes.
Oh, okay. Great. With social and political rights, they are complete. We have, globalization comes with a package. So it doesn't come just one. We have the other part, and we see that usually transnational corporations, they would choose to invest in countries where there is a sort of formal democracy, but then they would make use and exploit cheap labor, natural resources exploitation, long working hours, and they will be actually violators of most human rights. Why? Because inherently, economic rights are mostly collective rights. They deal with community rights that should belong not to the individual but to the community. And this is completely against the concept of utilitarianism. So what to do? My suggestion is that this issue needs to be properly addressed. But in order to go to reach to economic development, we should actually rely, and we should have as a premise a respect of civil and political rights, because they would be the basis for governance, accountability, and rule of law, which will form the perfect conditions, irrespective of any crisis, economic crisis, but there would be the perfect conditions of economic development, because if one has, if there's accountability, then the government would be very careful in what to decide. And I would just briefly finish saying that international law is not the only answer to especially economic rights, because international law is just as Marty Koscinemi said, it's just a gentle civilizers of nations, and because when, for example, when we have treaties, if it's a normal treaty, not human rights treaty, then states take rights and obligation with each other, right? And in human rights, they take obligation with each other, but the beneficiaries is their citizens. So another state has no reason whatsoever to go and seek implementation of human rights of another country. And that's why we need these implementing mechanisms. So it's a little difficult to go because they're not justiciable. Same goes with customary law, which is very important, but customary law takes a lot of time, and we're not in that stage. So I guess yeah. I would finish by saying that the reason needs to be found at the government, which should protect and try to go beyond formal democracy and go to substantive democracy. And as I said, the